Good morning.
Check.
Good morning. Yes.
Good morning.
1, 2, 3.
A lot of these systems that we call access control systems are actually identity systems for the physical world. I don't think there is an ideal identity. I think it's modality of choice. Great.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, welcome to TMT with IDCUBE. And we are really thankful for you doing this out of your packed and short and busy
It's all
schedule.
good. No, I appreciate the opportunity. I always love doing this, catching up with you and the team. So by all means, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I appreciate that, Lee. We straight on dwell on the subject, but let me just give you a little context and brief about it. So, IDCUBE believes in three core principles of access control, which are identities, intelligence, and infrastructure.
Okay.
However, today we'll dwell on
Yeah.
identities, considering the changing environment around access control and diversified identities requirement, considering the business nature and user experience.
Right.
So, with your vast experience, we want your perspective. You've been traveling around the world, talking to various leaders in markets. We want to see how these identities are being adopted in emerging versus the mature world.
Sure.
What are the different bottlenecks between these two markets? And how do we see the future around these identities?
Right.
So, if I may ask you to begin with, what are the access control identities which are actually in use today in access control?
Sure. Yeah, so it's interesting because I'll start by saying it's almost like we're in two parallel universes at the same time. You've got the existing systems of how they currently are set up now and everything around it, that is how it operates, the expectations, I call them the truths of like what it is. And then you've got this parallel universe around where I think is where things are going, and the systems are overlapping each other right now. And we're at a trade show, so that's why you have noise. It's okay. It's all part of it. But you have an overlap here that's happening, and the tension is the way the systems function different or the expectations they have. So I preface that because it depends on what we're talking about. On the identity side, historically, that's tied tightly to either the modality of how we use the identity of the person, because usually, realistically, most systems never really knew who the person was. We just knew like a identifier of them, right? It was a card number or something like that. And then it was associated to a card or a biometric, or it was associated to Bluetooth in an app, or whatever it might be. Now, though, as the systems are moving forward, and this is where I believe those that, like what you all are doing, which I think you end up winning in the end, because you've sort of separated identity of the person to what we do with it later. So, because I believe our industry's been a source of record physically, but we've never known who the person is. Now we're going to know who the people are, and then the access control systems almost become like an operator in a way. So it's like lock, unlock, notify, whatever it might be. So they like do process afterwards versus being the source of record. So that's the way I look at the world of where it is. So as currently right now, if we're talking about, call it the old way continuing to go, you have different modalities now of how you want the systems to operate based off of the experience that you want to have, the policy the place has. A lot of cases, a lot of these systems are based off of what you've invested in as far as the differentiator that you have and what you push. As we move forward, I believe the identity, a lot of these systems that we call access control systems are actually identity systems for the physical world. And then they have, depending on what integrations, things they built, like visitor management or automation platforms, when you think about utilization of AI, whatever it might be, that it becomes more of an identity play in automation than currently right now, where it's an access control, keeping bad people out with identity wrapped up with the modality that you use. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a long way of getting there, but yeah.
I mean that's a fair explanation. So, am I correct to say, as I asked, that the cards are there to stay, and the biometrics is another form of identity, maybe adopted at a different rate in different markets.
Yeah.
Uh, Bluetooth and NFC and QR codes
Yep.
have mixed of opinion again in different worlds, in different markets. Do you see there's anything else which is coming in, which is mushrooming, other than these 4 or 5 different kinds?
Yeah, I think next is like computer vision, and there's even more beyond that, right? I think as we look at biometrics, there's like 5 or 6 different
Yep.
ones within that as well. So,
Yep.
yeah, so my belief is that yes, cards just like keys or the other one are going to be here.
Mhm.
What we're getting to is choice, and it's going to be based off of not only the user themselves of what. And again, this depends on where you're on with the life of the system, or where you believe what core tenets we align on or don't about what the future looks like. So I really believe that it'll be modality of choice based off of the user, what they want, and then the system's policy based off the administrator or the person. Like for instance, if I'm critical infrastructure compared to a cinema,
Mhm.
they have 2 totally different policy types, user types, the rest of it, to where
Yep.
I can then create what is the experience and security posture that I want for that application. And I think
Mhm.
what we're running into now is a fantastic opportunity for our systems to be able to be what they need to be based off of the vertical type that you go after and what the users want it to be.
So what you're saying that this is majorly driven by what the user want and goes around the dynamics of a business and
Yeah,
the user experience.
yeah, and I think just cultural norms in certain areas too. Like when you go to the Japanese marketplace, the utilization of QR codes for hospitality, let's say, is totally normal, and it's
Oh, okay.
okay.
Wow, that's great.
Compared to in North America, QR codes being used in that same, it's hard for that to be an actual usage of it. Where, so depending on where you're at in the world would dictate that as well, because the cultural norms. But beyond that, yeah, I think all of those have a place. I do think, though, you'll look at them, then when we get to a metric of like adoption will differentiate. I do think things like cards versus mobile, I think mobile will be far greater because of visitors and different
But
application
again,
types.
I'm sorry for
Yeah, yeah.
interruption, but yeah, again, I see mobile. Don't you think? I mean, it would lot depend upon how it becomes easy for others to integrate and deal with, adopt.
Well, yeah,
So,
but that's
but yeah,
part of
we'll
the.
get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Before that, let me just roll back and
Yeah,
come on, because we are looking at these identities from a prism of 2 markets, which are the emerging and the mature markets.
sure.
So, if we consider these 2 separate markets, what do you think? What is the ideal identity for each one of them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is an ideal identity. I think it's modality of choice. And I think the quicker, it's sort of like asking me, do I think it's cloud or on-prem? I think it's hybrid, and I think it's choice. Like I think it's the application of the technology based off of the use case and the outcome that you want. And I don't care what market it is. Now, I do think you have certain markets that, say, in the emerging markets, where certain infrastructure or norms don't exist, it's a little bit easier to get adoption, where you have to necessarily. And by the way, I don't think it's a technical issue. I think it's more of a self identity problem that we have as an industry, where if I was trained a certain way and grew up in the industry for a long time, I may have some beliefs about what things are. And so this idea of being like, I don't have to maybe convince in certain marketplaces the adoption of cloud, because they, it's relatively, electronic access control is relatively new into that area. So as far as they know, it's just normal, right? In a lot of ways. So um, I don't, I'm not sure it matters in that end, to be honest with you. I do think certain emerging markets, like if I take this market, you have a nice crossover of sort of strict policy needs from a security standpoint and hospitality that cross, which makes mobile and NFC wallets ideal because of just the way that the structure is of the place here versus other markets that maybe don't have as much of a hospitality or adoption, frankly, of an experience. This place cares about experience. So because of that, it lends to more digital than a card, for instance.
So yes, even I speak the same language.
Yeah,
Very recently, we had a you know closed door event wherein I was talking or I was speaking on the identities, and I said there is no ideal identity. It's actually
good.
the choice,
See, we
and
align.
yeah, we are pretty much
Nice.
aligned. We are pretty much aligned. But yeah, one thing wherein I would want you to dwell further is the biometrics.
Hmm.
I see there are more bottlenecks which could be psychological or which could be to do with that particular region or the market,
Yeah,
and maybe certain compliance guidelines, governance
sure,
in specific markets.
100%.
Yeah. So, how do you see? And I see that biometrics are more as kind of a favorite, if I may quote, in the emerging markets versus what I hear about them in the mature world. What is your view on biometrics in
Yeah,
that
so my,
case?
my view on biometrics is a couple things. I think the best thing that's ever happened to biometrics is mobile, frankly, because I think it's created a conversation around technology adoption that on its own, biometrics was always seen as the outlier compared to cards and the rest. It was this thing over here that in certain markets people didn't want to touch because of the privacy and some of the dystopian things that come along with it. I do think as mobile has come in and people are more used to seamless experiences, there's a place for biometrics, frankly, and a story that biometrics couldn't tell itself that mobile is helping tell for it at the same time, and it benefits.
Mm.
I believe there are a handful of things with biometrics. It does have a history. There have been bad actors that have used it, and frankly, people that have done bad things with it. So, because of that, there's a dystopian view of it in a lot of marketplaces, which is valid, but then also overly done in some cases because it's easy to, in my opinion, and others too, but easier to coalesce all the bad things. The biometrics industry hasn't done a really good job of telling its own story about the positive things that are out there, right? So like we just let the masses tell how bad it is when now there are good actors and there are people that are applying it properly. So I think in certain verticals and in certain markets, it makes a lot of sense because if I want high levels of throughput with high levels of assurance, show me something that can do that. Now, computer vision can bring it, but it's then using some aspects of biometrics in a lot of ways to go do that and in the camera technology. So I think it's an application based. You know, like we've seen applications say here, I'm out in the desert doing drilling or whatever it might be. It's hundreds of degrees outside. I've got a busload of people that get off, and I need to get them through so they're not standing in the heat to go work. Biometrics is an easy way to get people through from time and attendance
So,
standpoint.
are you saying that it's industry specific?
I think it,
You're not sort of mapping it to the region
No, I
because
am. It's a matrix.
yeah.
So, like for instance, in North America, it's hard to sell biometrics into that because of the laws, even by state. It's not just by the U.S. itself, like a monolith. No, you have by state, so it makes it a little bit harder from an adoption standpoint, as well as just the trust factor that people have with it in that country compared to other markets where it's a little bit more acceptable as a technology standpoint. So you'll see people gravitate. Then, in addition to where it gets adopted. A good example, though, too, is I mean, most major airports now across the world, doesn't
Are
matter where you're at,
yeah, yeah,
uses it. So it's application
absolutely,
based, even in
absolutely.
countries like North America where it's maybe not adopted as much.
Mhm.
And then I've been paying attention to it. Like, go to Singapore, the ease of entrance and exit at Singapore is like no place anywhere. And people talk about it in such a positive standpoint. I was in Turkey going through the airport in Turkey and going into the lounge area that they have there. It's like seamless in that. Now, I'm sure there are some people on the sort of spectrum of care a lot, don't care, right? Somewhere in between. You have people asking questions along that continuum. I personally, do care sometimes and don't care other times. Like I have no choice. If I want to go to Singapore,
Mm.
like
Yeah,
well, you're gonna have to
first
do
you'll have to go through it.
it. Right.
Welcome to
So do it.
Dubai. We are sitting in Dubai.
Yeah,
You have to go through the biometrics
correct.
at the airport, and but yes,
It makes me wonder. Sorry, it makes me also wonder that at some point, as things become more normalized and you get desensitized to it, will adoption increase? I think so.
so you are saying that lot to do is with the past experiences of people and how probably the biometric identities were treated in the mature world. Although you just uh, mentioned states for this, but how about Europe?
Yeah, so Europe's the same type of thing. Well, some countries in Europe, right? So Europe not being this monolithic just thing, right? There are certain countries within Europe that care more than others, if you would, around it. So it varies. It definitely does. Definitely varies.
Yeah. Okay. We were on biometrics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was talking about the experiences. So as you said that the biometric identity as a modality of access control, and you were saying it's a lot to do with the past experiences of the user in a specific market that is sort of changed the adoption rate in the mature markets.
Correct.
So do I take it that in future the similar scenario can happen in the emerging world as well, where it is highly adopted and used?
That's a good question. Yeah. So putting my prediction hat on, if you would, on that end. Again, I think it, if being fully open and honest about it, it depends on the country you're in and how some of these are mandated. You have no choices type of a thing in order to just the way that identities are used in those marketplaces, right? So in some cases, it's just, you know, just like a good example here in Dubai, there's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
So there's not really a conversation around, are you comfortable with the cameras? It's like, if you're here, you're
You'll have
comfortable
to
with the
deal with it.
cameras,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's an aspect of that. I do think as time goes on and there are more, I'll call it positive experiences around it, and the threat of bad
Goes down.
well, I mean, I don't know if the threat goes down, but maybe the if you think of them as two cups being filled with water, there's more water in the bad cup currently now than the good cup, and over time the good cup fills, right? And I would like to believe that not as many bad actors are doing whatever we believe that they're doing or have been shown to be doing, right? So where
But
you
so
it becomes more positive.
are you saying that it's easy to steal compared to the other identities?
It's easy to
Steal and misuse?
I I think it's a little bit, yeah. I mean, I think it's been shown to be, and the perception is that it can be. Now, I do know, like I said, there's plenty of good acting organizations that where you've been able to take away the identifiers of the biometrics, right, and properly put it together to where those fears or the misuse doesn't exist. But perception's reality in a lot of cases here, and we're talking about adoption rates. If my perception is it's bad, then it's bad. I don't care if it actually is or not. My perception is it is. So I think this comes. It's a multiple things. It's perception, it's reality, it's experience, and frankly, it's bad actors. Like all of that included creates the adoption and the demand of what's going to be here. I believe over time, as more technology gets adopted, if you look at the percentages of increase, which are a lot of what we're talking about here, it will continue to increase and the rate will go up.
Okay, so you're
And
saying that still the rate
100%,
of adoption on biometrics will
100%.
go up,
Yes.
but is it across the world or is it only like one part of the market?
I think they will track adoption of technology rates, whatever market you're in. I think markets, again, there's certain areas in because emerging markets versus just mature markets over time changes too, right? Um, so I believe we're not, our industry's no different than business trends. We'd like to believe we are, and like,
Yeah.
demographic trends and all that stuff. We like to believe we're this like special fruit. We track all those things too. We follow those as well. So I think we will continue to follow as markets like this adopt, let's say, uh, cloud and AI architectures, and they're focused on experience with a high level of security, and you have surveillance and everything else. Biometrics trail with that, so why wouldn't it, right?
Yeah. And don't you think the smart cities and city surveillance across the world, so any which way your face is getting recorded,
Yes. So
right?
this is where you start to get desensitized to the idea, and it's just like, I'll give you a good example. In North America, you've got an entire generation now that are growing up that have never used a key to get in their house. Like my kids
Mhm.
have never used a key.
Oh, wow.
They
Okay.
because we have a pin pad and as they grow up and have a phone, they're not going to use a pin pad anymore. They're going to just walk up to the house and the door's going to open. Like if I was to literally give my son a key right now, he would
Yes.
look at the thing and be
And
like,
what is it?
what do I like?
What
What
do
do I
I
do
do
with
with
this?
it?
Right?
Oh.
Like so.
And I think that's where probably the entire mindset differs between the emerging and the mature. I still don't imagine countries like India or maybe even this region, the Gulf region, um, would be entirely dependent on keypads. We still use manual keys in one of the most premium localities and the premises. And sometimes I even see that in offices, the manual key is more adopted than and
Sure.
comfortable and
But
comfortable.
that
So
was true in North America at one point as well. So I think
yeah,
over time, because I would also say the rate of adoption of QR codes in India is through the roof compared to North America. Like the amount that you pay and what you do with them in India is so different than North America and other markets that I could see where you would find QR codes because they're so tied to identity, right?
yeah,
To where at that point, is that a biometric?
the QR codes.
I mean, is it tied to a biometric?
It's can be
Can
it
be.
yeah it
That's what
can be
because
on
we're
phone
doing
biometric
hypotheticals.
wherein
Sure.
you control who actually opens the QR code, right?
And then you can quickly be like, and who opens the door?
Yeah,
So
and
like you can see how because of the norms of that marketplace, just like I was telling you the one in Japan, like the ability to utilize that to get in, you can see security be wrapped around it from a biometric standpoint. I don't know, maybe there's cameras also that, triangulate that it's you and your intent, and then you use the QR code, it ties it. Like there, yeah. So that's why I think it's more of an application based question than a hypothetical of adoption. It's a case of, in my opinion, it's a case of when, not if, and how, not if. We've been in a market of if, and I think it's when and how is probably more of the question that we will be asking every day that goes by.
but since you touched upon the topic of QR code, and I actually wanted to understand how QR code as a modality or an identity and access control doing between these two markets. And as you've been saying that, okay, these are widely adopted in Japan, and
In
I
South
can,
America, the certain markets in South America.
yeah, I mean, South America I consider as the emerging world, and
Sure.
I see that the trend in emerging world are quite uh, similar compared to what they are in the mature markets. But when you pick up Japan, which I consider as the mature market, and you talk about QR codes, which is completely different to how the QR codes being treated as a modality in United States. So, is it again on the experience, or there is something else to do
I
with
think
the
it's the
QR codes?
experience and the application again. So, like a good example, I utilized a QR code this past weekend to get into a sporting event, and it was tied to an identifier of myself. Now, biometric, kinda, if you were to associate it to pay and sort of on the back end how they put it together, maybe not in the purest form of what we're talking about, which is like facial, walking up to it and using my face. So, if I look at sporting events where high levels of assurance with a high level of convenience, that's a great application of where biometric barcode type technology does work in an application like that. So, in some ways, if we were to get specific, the answer would be yes on the adoption, right? Now, utilizing QR code to say get into an Airbnb or an office. Now,
Mhm.
I say that, but a QR code is being used a lot from a visitor management standpoint. So, where you want sort of lower friction, higher level of experience or identify. Getting somebody to add an app to their phone is hard.
Mhm.
So sometimes I just want it to be a simple identifier that it's them. Like you get on an airplane for there's a lot of applications, I guess,
Mhm.
where you can. It's just not at the, let's say, scale of probably what our wishes and desires are. But it is a modality that will have a purpose and use for the particular and the right application. Maybe in North America, lower policy on security, higher convenience. Whereas in other marketplaces, it's seen as a higher
So,
level of
so what do
security
you
with
see? What
higher
are the
convenience.
bottlenecks? I mean, I see a very great use case of dynamic QR codes. When you said
Sure.
visitor, it's like more about static QR codes, but
Well,
then there
even
is
in that
dynamic.
case, there's dynamic,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wasn't speaking one to the other. I would say on my end, what I'm talking about mostly is dynamic.
Okay. And I see, since you also mentioned that one of the sporting event, you went and you used the QR code to gain access, right, in that event. And I see uh, that universities
Yeah,
could be a great
100%.
use case for the dynamic QR codes. Considering the low cost around it and easy maintenance,
Sure.
you really need not to worry about what kind of device you know
Yep.
have in your
Yeah.
hand,
Doesn't
and
matter.
you're still getting upgraded to the newer or the new gen
Yeah.
identity or the modality.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I think it's a great application. If you think about a university and a college, it's sort of a confined city in its own set. So the rules can be very different and it's somewhat controlled in that end. And you do have, I mean, you have every type of people that are going through there, whether they're students, teachers, admins, people servicing it, guests, like you have everything going on that. And you need to have a sense of community, if you would, and openness in a lot of campuses too. So it's a very complicated event. You can see it at religious as well too, areas where if you think about it, those are places that typically want to be open to the public, but then also secure because in North America, in places they're high risk,
Hmm.
right? So that's a good example of combining convenience and security together, and where technology would help deliver high levels of assurance and high levels of convenience. I think because of that, technology has to be adopted in order for the solutions to be done the way that we want them to be done. So there's like a forcing function that happens. So all of these things, that's what makes this time in our industry one of the reasons, like the best time to be in the industry, because it's things are changing and it's more dynamic than it has been historically. So now all of these questions are open to be able to be, applied and solved.
So what I'm sort of getting, what you're saying, the trust factor is the big thing, while the
I mean, trust is one of them.
which kind of impacts the adoption rate.
Trust is a huge part of it.
Huge
Yes.
part of it.
I mean, I think that's kind of what we talk
And who
about.
builds the trust, Lee? I mean,
Oh, I
who builds
mean,
that trust?
all of us.
All
Like,
of us, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so like when I see on your board here, you have data sovereignty, right? That's about trust in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, right? So like
Absolutely.
encryption
Yeah.
about trust. These ISO certifications and GDPR and SOC 2s and all of these things that we're talking about are really fundamentally around how do I communicate trust and then how do I act to ensure trust, right? So I think it's all part of what we do. And I think coming out of COVID, and one of the reasons why we have changes happening here in our industry is I do think the trust and comfort was broken.
Hmm.
That because the way that our expectations of how our systems worked pre-COVID
Hmm.
worked, keep bad people out. Uh, Trust me, we have it handled. We're the experts in that. And then all of a sudden, overnight, you're like, I need health attestation. I need assurance and trust that the right people are getting in versus keeping bad people out. And our systems were like, well, we're not really made to let the right people in. We're made to keep bad people out. Trust was broken. And the systems that we've historically used are those that are ready to help me for the next 30 years. So it's opened up this gap for us to redefine trust.
Is it also to do with the education and exposure around an identity and around technology at a large?
Yeah, I mean, I think any dynamic
Because
industry.
I see the trend completely different
Okay.
in the emerging versus the mature world.
Okay. Say more.
Um, I mean, since we just talked about two kind of modalities or identities, the biometrics and the QR codes, and in both of these, I kind of get a sense that you are saying it is lot to do with the trust and the past experiences, whereas I see that these are getting widely adopted in the emerging world more than the mature world. And I see the larger population in the emerging world, and you know people are coming out of where they were 20 years back. So they're still experiencing the the unification of the world, wherein they're still elevating themselves. People are getting um, accommodative to technology,
Yep.
and knowledge could be limited compared to your exposure in West with the technology, and that's possibly kept it going, and the adoption rate is increasing on the modalities or the identities. What you're saying, like QRs and the biometrics compared
Yeah,
to the
but
West?
let's talk about that. So, and because I do think nuances matter now, because I don't know if it's if we're doing ourselves justice by just labeling emerging and mature markets, because
Hmm.
as technology gets adopted, I think
It
it
gets adopted.
changes, and actually it may become more parallel because of ease of adoption in certain markets versus others because of cultural norms and whatever. But like, let's take India.
Hmm.
Why are QR codes adoption great there? I'll give you my opinion. You tell me yours.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I believe a couple things. A, I think they're widely utilized now. So there's an understanding and comfort and acceptance of them as a way to do intent, or the way it's part of life in a lot of ways. You
Hmm.
pay that way. I mean, last time I was there was a guy begging on the street using a QR code. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
right. So it's like it's clearly everywhere. Every taxi I paid for, like everything, it was everybody used it to the point where it was even like, for me, it stood out, right? Like, and I was like, wow, this is everywhere. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, coming from a mature market, I'm like, man, I wish we adopted QR code as much as this market did, right? So it's like,
Yep.
it's on its head.
Yeah.
Number two, you mentioned the ease of use of no matter what your phone type is. So in that market, the adoption of Android versus
It's much
iOS,
higher.
it's much
Much
higher,
higher.
right?
Yeah.
So you have that. I think there's a cost associated to it as well.
Hmm.
Right now, the cost structures of the NFC wallets,
Hmm.
the biometric hardware, everything
Hmm.
is higher than, say, the QR codes with a QR code scanner. So like all of those things and probably a bunch more create an environment where, you know what, we're going to utilize this technology to do it. I also think the this is actually one I've been thinking about. I don't have like a full thought out on this, but I've been thinking more about it. In a lot of the emerging markets, what I've noticed is, especially in areas where there's a high density of technical talent,
Hmm.
so Sao Paulo,
Mm.
Brazil,
Yeah.
India,
Yeah.
the ability for people to create applications, tools, things like that. The QR code is a very low bar to grab to be able to utilize the technology and the experience, whether it's
Hmm.
ticketing, you know, the amount of visitor management systems that came out of India through COVID was a lot,
Well, yeah.
because two people got together and created an iPad app using QR codes and were able to easily deploy that, compared to what it would take for NFC and biometrics and
Along.
everything else.
So
So
yeah,
the
ease of using the
technical ease,
technology.
correct,
Yeah. Yeah.
creates this
Yeah.
environment where
Yeah.
it's like, all right, these things make
So
sense in that market.
looking at time,
Yeah, sorry, I could
we
I
would.
told you I could do this all day.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll try and wrap up
Yeah,
and
yeah,
go
yeah.
to the most
Thank you.
hottest topic
All right,
of today, and about the modalities and
all right.
identities. But before that, I would like to answer your question on QR code and why the adoption rate is higher in India.
Yeah, please.
Is probably due to government policies
Yeah,
and how government have rolled out, a certain way of using QR codes as the mode of payments.
yeah,
And that sort of build that trust, since you were talking about a lot on
yeah.
trust, and that built the trust that when the banks and when you're able to send and receive payments via QR code, so it's safe to use basically.
Yeah,
So that's sort of kind of
correct.
build that trust. Um, yeah, so lot of buzz around Bluetooth and NFC. And again, you were saying that yes, the technology or the modality or the identity has nothing to do with the kind of market we are in. It's just, the adoption. But again, I was talking to one of our common friends yesterday, and he was saying that they are blowing numbers in United States
Hmm.
around the NFC, around
Yeah,
the wallets, the Apple as well
yep.
as the Google.
Google.
Yeah. Uh, I don't see these similar use cases in this part of the world, which is the emerging. So what I want to understand, considering the limitation in time, uh, how do you see the adoption rate? What are the bottlenecks? And then how do you differentiate and your viewpoint on Bluetooth versus the NFC credential?
Sure. So again, I'll just say I think both technologies have a place. If you're building an application, I actually can see we were talking about it yesterday actually with the same people you were talking to, is where you can see a combination of the two. I can have an application that utilizes Bluetooth but also has NFC wallet to be able to do for intent depending on the experience I want to create. I think some of what you see is a handful of things. Number one, up until recently, certain markets in the world weren't even open to the ability to utilize the technology until recent. The North American marketplace has had a longer tail of adoption because it's been open there a lot more than it has been, say, here and in another market. So I think time is one that will do that. I also think they're starting to see the adoption. Granted, they're going from 0 to 100, so that's like, great growth, right? I'd love to see 100 to 200 and what that percentage rate looks like, but that aside, I also think you're seeing a good example of the utilization of it for not only just employees from enterprise, but then also the ability for visitors and that, where I do think that it's a great way of sending a credential to somebody to get into a building versus waiting for them to come to get a card or however else they did it before. So I just think it's also opened up the population that we haven't been addressing before that we currently are now on that wallet will open up on that side. So I think it's just a moment of time. I do think as Apples and Googles and everybody figure out the cultures in the markets and come to an agreement when it comes to data and costs and partners and whatever. I mean, I am comfortable to say is that if this market was open right now with wallet, which I don't even know if it is.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
A year from now, we'll be having a very different conversation than right now. And the only reason why we're not seeing it currently right now is that it wasn't open a year ago. Give
Yep.
me a year,
Yeah.
and I bet you'll see rate of increase because a market like this where you have multinational organizations coming in, a market that wants the best in the market and has a strong hospitality aspect to it is ripe for adoption to where I will be using my phone to get into my hotels. I'll be using it to get into everything, like everything.
Do you think standards like Aliro would increase the
Oh yeah,
adoption rate?
100%. Yes.
And where we are today on Aliro?
So Waliro, my understanding is 2026 is going to be a big year for it. They've been building for the past 2 years. A lot of progress, and they just recently made some announcements at CES, which was last two weeks ago, I think,
Yeah.
or even last week, maybe even last week. They've made a ton of progress that 2026 will be a very big year for Waliro.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything on Bluetooth versus NFC?
So
Which
again,
is the most prominent one
I know,
and the easy to adopt?
I don't know if
Or
it's a verse. I think it's an and.
it's an?
So like I think like UWB coming into play, Bluetooth from an experience standpoint, depending on the application.
case?
Yeah,
The
like again, I think if you build an
Mhm.
app that has to have some sort of functionality, you will have a combination of Bluetooth and NFC in it. So
Do you think
I mean,
the two will coexist
yeah,
in similar
100%.
environment and similar use case for similar application?
For specific application and specific use case, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there are applications where it will make sense.
Mhm.
I do think, I think we've if NFC would have opened a while ago, Bluetooth would have probably never been utilized in some of the manners of what it was. It's just that we didn't have access to it, and companies wanted to have experiences. I think as time goes on, they will sort of find their ground to where they should be working, and then once they do that, it'll be more of an application standpoint.
Okay, one last point on
Excuse me.
Bluetooth.
Sorry. Go ahead. Start
You want
over.
some water?
Do that again. I'm okay.
Yeah. Do you think the devices kind of have hindered the Bluetooth adoption rate, the mobile devices? Like different kind of mobile devices? Not everyone is same.
No, I think we've been utilizing Bluetooth beyond what it's intended to be for. And we've done a very good job, if we're being kind to ourselves, of doing voodoo magic to make it work
Yeah.
close to what it was supposed to do. I think with NFC coming into play and being able to use, we actually start to utilize the technology properly. And a lot of the friction that was there from it goes away just for the matter of fact that it's going to be used properly. Like I think if there's great examples of using technology in the wrong application, where when you stop using it in the wrong application, all of a sudden it becomes right. Like long distance, for instance, if I'm I don't see NFC being that answer. I think Bluetooth will be there. Like so, I just think it's more of a case of application than anything else.
Lee, thank you.
No,
Once
thank
again,
you.
thank you for doing this. I
You-
hope this conversation drives newer perspective in our markets and in our audience. I look forward to see you sometime soon again.
Yeah, you too. No, thank you for
Thank you very
doing
much
this.
for doing
Thank
this.
you. This
Yeah,
is great.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.